The NBA has seen some of the greatest athletes to ever walk on this earth. Guys who were supposed to rewrite the history books, carry franchises, and cement their names in history forever. But sometimes, before that story even gets the chance to be written, one moment changes everything. This is not a list of the most gruesome injuries you've ever seen. We're not here just for the visuals. This video is about what was taken, the careers that were supposed to be legendary, cut short or completely altered before they ever reached their ceiling. Every player in this video was either robbed of their prime, forced to become a completely different player just to survive, or watched their window close before it ever fully opened. And to be clear about how we're picking these guys, this is about the version of these players we never got to see. The seasons that were supposed to happen, the championships that should have been won, the legacies that injuries rewrote before they were even finished being written. These are the worst injuries in NBA history. And of course, you all know who's first in the story, so let's go ahead and start with none other than Derrick Rose. To understand what we lost, you have to fully understand who Derrick Rose was. He grew up in Inglewood, one of the roughest neighborhoods in the south side of Chicago. Basketball wasn't just a hobby for him, it was a way out. And from the moment he stepped onto a court, everybody around him knew they were watching something different. The explosiveness, the instincts, the way he attacked the rim like he had something to prove every single time down the floor. Rose went to Memphis for 1 year, averaged 14 points and 4 assists, and left as one of the most hyped up prospects the draft had seen in years. The Chicago Bulls won the 2008 lottery with just a 1.7% chance of landing the #1 pick. And when they didn't have to think twice.
The Chicago Bulls select Derrick Rose from the University of Memphis.
And the city went crazy. Rose hit the NBA and never slowed down. He won Rookie of the Year in 2009. He made the All-Star team. He turned the Bulls into a legitimate contender in a conference that LeBron James owned.
Over Rose, rejected by Rose! Rondo's shot was rejected. Rose rejects the Rondo shot.
But it was the 2010-2011 season that announced to the entire league exactly who Derrick Rose was becoming.
Why not? Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league?
He averaged 25 points, over 7.5 assists, and 4 rebounds per game, leading Chicago to the best record in the NBA. He was fearless. He was relentless. He was playing with a maturity that had no business being attached to a 22-year-old. And on the final day of the regular season, Derrick Rose became the youngest MVP in NBA history at 22 years and 191 days old. He got 113 out of 121 first-place votes, which means it wasn't even a conversation. Now, the following season was the lockout year, shortened to just 66 games. And on opening night, Rose went into Staples Center and hit a game-winning floater to beat the Lakers. The city of Chicago felt like everything was right on schedule.
Derrick Rose and the Bulls come back to take a 1-point lead.
But during that season, Rose ended up dealing with nagging injuries that limited him throughout the year. And there were quiet concerns about how much wear his body was absorbing. The Bulls pushed deep into the playoffs, and Rose was their engine every step of the way. Then on April 28th, 2012, it happened. Game 1 against Philadelphia. The Bulls were up 12 points with under 2 minutes left. The game was already in hand. Rose caught the ball, attacked the paint, and on the plant of a hop step, his left knee just buckled underneath him. No contact, nobody touched him.
Rose came down bad on his left foot. See him holding onto his knee and down.
He tore his ACL on a move that he made 1,000 times before, and then he didn't play again for over a year. The Bulls tried to hold things together without him, but it was never the same. Rose came back the following season, but before he could ever fully get going, he tore the meniscus in his right knee just 10 games into his return. Then in February of 2015, he tore that same meniscus again. 3 major knee injuries in the span of 3 years on both legs. The player who built his entire game around getting to the rim at full speed was being slowly taken apart piece by piece. He was never the same explosive force after that, and everybody watching knew it. But there were still moments that reminded you exactly of who he was. In May of 2015, in Game 3 of the second round against LeBron's Cavaliers, with the game tied and just a few seconds left, Rose peeled off a screen, got Tristan Thompson switched onto him.
Fires away. Bang! It's over! The Bulls win at the buzzer!
Bulls win 99-96. I still remember watching this live and losing my mind. Rose finished that game with 30 points and afterwards admitted with a smile that no, he did not call glass. And for one night, it felt like the old Derrick Rose was still in there somewhere. And if you thought the injuries weren't enough, the way his time in Chicago ended made it even harder to watch. Rose found out he was traded to the New York Knicks through a text message. No phone call from the front office before, no conversation, absolutely nothing but a text. The kid who grew up in Inglewood who carried the weight of an entire city on his back, who gave everything he had to the Bulls even when his body was failing him, found out his time was up the same way you find out about a change in dinner plans. All in all, Chicago didn't get the ending it deserved with Derrick Rose, and neither did he. He bounced around the league after Chicago. The Knicks, the Cavaliers, the Timberwolves, the Pistons, then back to the Knicks and eventually Memphis. There were still flashes. In 2018, on Halloween night in Minnesota, he scored 50 points against Utah while the crowd chanted MVP. MVP. It was one of the most emotional moments the league had seen in years. I was in tears because everyone in that building understood what they were watching. A guy who had lost so much, still finding a way to give everything he had left.
Just to come in, be the veteran, help guys out, and lead by example. You see me talking, it's the most I ever talked to my teammates in my whole career. So it means a lot.
Grab a tissue box and hold it close to you because you might need it throughout the rest of this video. Derrick Rose ended up retiring in September of 2024 after 16 seasons. He took out full-page ads in newspapers in all 6 cities he played in. A goodbye that was as graceful as any you will ever see from a professional athlete. And on January 24th, 2026, the Chicago Bulls retired as number 1. At the ceremony, Rose showed the crowd the photo of him lying on the floor after that ACL tear in 2012. He looked out at the arena and said they had to go through that moment together, and that the crowd was the only reason he made it from that night to this one. Derrick Rose deserves so much more than what his body allowed him to have. But as cruel as the story is, at least he got to show the world what he was capable of. The next man in this video never even got the chance. In 2007, the Portland Trail Blazers won the NBA draft lottery and had a decision to make. With a number 1 overall pick, they could take Kevin Durant, a 6'10" scorer who looked like he was going to be a problem for the next 10 years. Or they could take Greg Oden, a 7-foot center out of Ohio State who looked like he'd been built in a laboratory specifically to dominate professional basketball. Portland ended up choosing Oden, and at that time, most people thought they made the right call. The NBA at that time was still focused on the dominant center, and Oden was everything you wanted in a franchise center. Massive, coordinated, with footwork that had no business being attached to someone his size. And don't forget his defensive presence that changed the entire complexion of a game just by being on the floor. He led Ohio State to the national championship game as a freshman, posting 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 blocks in a loss to Florida. His ceiling was Hakeem. His ceiling was Bill Russell. Portland fans felt like they had won the championship before the season even started. Before Greg Oden played a single NBA game, he had a microfracture surgery in his right knee in September of 2007. He ended up missing his entire rookie season. And when he finally stepped onto the floor in the 2008-2009 season, the flashes were real. He averaged nearly 9 points and 7 rebounds in just 20 minutes a game, showing exactly why everyone had been so excited in the first place. But then the left knee went. A fractured patella ended his 2009-2010 season before it barely began. He missed the entire 2010-2011 season. He missed the entire 2011-2012 season. And Portland eventually waived him in March of 2012. Greg Oden ended up playing 105 NBA games across parts of 3 seasons. Kevin Durant, you know, the player taken right behind him, was already a scoring champion and well on his way to becoming one of the greatest players of his generation. The cruelest part of Oden's story isn't just the injuries, it's what came with them. He has spoken openly about how dark those years were, sitting and watching and rehabbing and hoping while the entire basketball world moved on without him. The mental toll of being unable to do the one thing you had done your entire life was something he struggled with deeply. And he's been honest about the fact that he lost his way for a long period of time. And yet they have the gall to call this man a bust. It's not his fault that his body betrayed him. He attempted one last comeback with the Miami Heat in 2013-2014, playing 23 games and showing some flashes that made you wish things had been different. But unfortunately for him, his knees wouldn't allow anything more than that. That was it. There's a video that circulates every so often that captures everything you need to know about what Greg Oden lost.
Do you play basketball?
I used to.
3 words that carry the weight of everything. A number 1 pick, a franchise savior, a player who was supposed to anchor a dynasty, reduced to a tall stranger that a grandmother could even place. Okay, I'm sorry, but the story does not end there. Greg Oden ended up going back to Ohio State, earned his undergraduate degree in 2019, and then he kept on going, completed a master's degree in sport coaching. He joined the staff at Butler as the coach in 2022, working with young big men, teaching them the game that he never fully got to play. He got married, he had a daughter, and by all accounts, he found peace that his playing days never allowed him to have. When he returned to Portland years later, he seemed like a man who had made his way through the fire and came out on the other side. He was happy, he was thankful, and he was at peace with a story that had every reason to break him. Greg Oden never became what everyone believed he would be, but watching where he ended up, it's not hard to feel like he won something in the end anyway. And before we move on, I have to show you guys something really cool. We all grew up ripping packs, right? Tearing through that wrapper, have your heart pounding and hoping you hit something insane. That feeling never went away. We just grew up and instead convinced ourselves that it was somehow childish. Courtyard brought it back and made it smarter. Courtyard is a marketplace where you can open packs, own real physical collectibles, and trade them instantly around the world without ever touching a box, buying a stamp, or praying that the guy on eBay isn't scamming you. Your cards sit in their vault, fully insured at market value, stored for free in a temperature-controlled facility. And when you want the physical item, they'll just ship it to you. And I feel like I have to mention this, but there's no buyer fees, no seller fees. Authenticity is guaranteed on everything. They have Pokemon cards, sports cards, comic books, pretty much everything, and yet there's still more coming. And every pack you get comes with a guaranteed buyback offer at fair market value. So if you open something and it's not for you, you can sell it back instantly. Courtyard is pioneering the next generation of commerce through gamified shopping, and it's actually insanely cool. So make sure you go to courtyard.io and use my code JZUncut15 to get 15% off your next order. Again, the code is JZUncut15, or use the QR code, or use the link down in the description. Major thanks again to Courtyard for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to it. Greg Oden never got to show the world what he was, but the tragedy of Portland did not end with him. Because while Oden was sitting in street clothes watching from the sideline, his teammate was quietly becoming one of the most beautiful players the NBA had seen in years. And then the same city, the same franchise, and the same cruel moment took him too. This one hurts me. If you watched the NBA in the late 2000s, you knew exactly who Brandon Roy was. And if you played NBA 2K10, then you really know, because I was that guy. I would boot up that game, pick the Portland Trailblazers, and spend the entire game running everything through number 7. Brandon Roy could get a bucket in any situation the game threw at him, and that translated directly from the screen to real life.
Opportunities making the most. Roy goes inside and posterizes, checks out.
He wasn't the most explosive athlete. He was not going to blow past you with pure speed. What he had was something rarer than that. He had feel. He had a command of the game that most players spend their entire careers chasing and never find. He could read a defense, slow the game down, and get exactly the shot he wanted every single time. Kobe Bryant once said that Brandon Roy was the hardest player in the Western Conference to guard. That's not a quote you throw around lightly. Roy came out of the University of Washington, drafted 6th overall in 2006 by Minnesota, and immediately traded to Portland. He won Rookie of the Year in his first season. He made 3 straight All-Star teams from 2008 to 2010. He even made 2 All-NBA teams. He was the cornerstone of a young Blazers core alongside LaMarcus Aldridge that had the entire league excited about what Portland was building. We are talking about a player who had the skill set, the basketball IQ, and the clutch gene to go down as one of the greatest guards in NBA history. I promise that is not an exaggeration. That's what was on the table. But of course, there was a problem that nobody outside the organization fully understood yet. Brandon Roy was playing without cartilage in his knees. Both of them, bone on bone. Every game, every practice, every cut, and every drive to the basket was happening on a foundation that was slowly grinding itself into nothing. The pain he felt was constant. The surgeries kept coming. And yet Roy kept playing, kept producing, kept willing himself onto the floor because that's exactly who he was. This guy had such big moments that I still talk about to this day. In January of 2008, he dropped a career high of 52 points on the Phoenix Suns. He hit game winners that made Portland fans lose their minds. He was the guy you wanted with the ball when it mattered most.
Back to Blake, to Roy, 3-pointer for the lead.
And then came the moment that defined his legacy forever. Game 4 of the 2011 first-round playoff series against the Dallas Mavericks. Roy had barely played that season. He was in and out of the lineup, his knees barely holding together. Portland was down 23 points in the 4th quarter. The game was all but over, except Brandon Roy had not gotten that message. He checked in off the bench and went to work. He scored 18 of his 24 points in the final quarter, cutting the lead down, hit shot after shot while the crowd in Portland went absolutely delirious, and dragged the Blazers all the way back to an 84-82 victory. That was the largest 4th quarter comeback in franchise history. And when it was over, Roy was in tears on the court, and so were a lot of people watching, because everyone in that building understood what they had just seen. A man playing on borrowed time, giving everything his body had left for one more unforgettable night.
It was, it still just doesn't feel real yet, it was just an unbelievable game, and the comeback, with everything I've been through this season, it just all kind of came into that moment, you know.
He retired in December of 2011. Portland used the amnesty clause to waive him. He was 27 years old. He did try to come back with the Minnesota Timberwolves in 2012 after trying some experimental treatment options. There were real signs in the preseason that the old Brandon Roy was still in there somewhere, but a collision with a defender in a preseason game damaged his knee even further. And after just 5 games, the season ended for him yet again. That was the last time Brandon Roy played professional basketball. And after the NBA, Roy poured everything he had into coaching. He took over at Nathan Hale High School in Seattle, and in 2017, he led them to a perfect 29-0 season and a state championship. With a young Michael Porter Jr. on the roster, he was named the Naismith National High School Coach of the Year. Then he went back to his alma mater, Garfield High School, and won state titles in 2018 and 2020. That same competitive fire, the same ability to get the best out of people around him, just in a different arena. Brandon Roy found a way to keep giving the game everything he had left, even after the game had taken so much from him. Roy was one of the most gifted guards this league has ever seen, taken away at 27. We never got to see the ceiling, and that will never stop being one of basketball's greatest tragedies. Brandon Roy was one of the greatest guards we never fully got to see. But the next player in this video was not just supposed to be one of the greatest forwards we never got to see. He was supposed to be one of the greatest players to ever play the game, period. Now, I'm sure most of you guys know this by now, but I am a Pistons fan. But I never got to see Grant Hill play live. By the time I was old enough to really understand basketball, the best version of him was already gone. Everything I know about prime Grant Hill came from my dad and my older cousins. And the way they talk about him is something I've never forgotten. It's not the way you talk about a great player you used to watch. It's the way you talk about something that was taken from you. Like they lost something they're never getting back. Grant Hill grew up in a household that understood greatness. His father, Calvin Hill, was an NFL Pro Bowler. His mother, Janet Hill, was a roommate of Hillary Clinton. He was raised with the expectation of excellence in everything he did. And from the moment he arrived at Duke, it was clear he was going to deliver on every bit of it. He won 2 NCAA championships with the Blue Devils under Coach K. The Detroit Pistons ended up drafting him 3rd overall in 1994, and the city embraced him immediately. He co-won Rookie of the Year with Jason Kidd. And from there, the ascent was rapid and breathtaking. In his first 6 seasons, he averaged over 21 points, nearly 8 rebounds, and over 6 assists per game. The comparisons that were being made about Grant Hill in the mid-90s were not comparisons to good players. They were comparisons to Michael Jordan. Some people went further and said he was the next player who could transcend the sport the way Jordan had. He finished 3rd in MVP voting in 97. He was an all-star every single year. Detroit loved him the way cities only loved a handful of players in a generation. And then, of course, as you guys know, everything changed on the night in April of 2000. Hill sprained his left ankle in a game against Philadelphia late into the regular season. At first, it was diagnosed as a bone bruise. Nothing too serious. He played through it in the playoffs, which unfortunately only made things worse. What nobody knew at the time was that it was actually a fracture, and that playing on it had caused damage that would take years to fully fix. That summer, Grant Hill signed with Orlando in a sign and trade, set to team up with a young Tracy McGrady in what looked like the beginning of a new powerhouse. Instead, it became one of the most heartbreaking chapters in NBA history. Over his first 3 seasons in Orlando, Hill played just 4 games, then 14, and then 29. 5 surgeries in 4 years. In 2003, one of those procedures was complicated by a life-threatening infection that had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with how fragile the human body can be. There were actually stretches where the question was not when he would return to basketball, but the question rather was whether he would be okay as a person. Grant Hill has been honest about what those years had costed him. He said publicly that mistakes were made in how his injuries were managed, that he felt let down by the medical process, and that being put back on the court before his body was ready made everything worse.
You know, feeling like I was let down, like the medical community didn't do me right in that way.
The most painful part for Detroit fans was the timing. When the Pistons completed the sign and trade, they got a raw prospect nobody even batted an eye at named Ben Wallace. He was just a throw-in, and well, he ended up becoming the anchor of a future championship team in 2004, with the same fan base that had watched Grant Hill carry them for years, and he should have been a part of that. Instead, he was in Orlando, rehabbing for what felt like the 100th time, watching from afar. But Grant Hill refused to let that be his ending. In the 2004-2005 season, he came back healthy, played 67 games, and averaged nearly 20 points per game. He even made the All-Star team. He went to Phoenix after that and spent 5 productive seasons as a respected two-way contributor, helping the Suns reach the 2010 conference finals. He reinvented himself completely, from the player who was going to be the face of the league into a veteran who made every team he was on better. He retired in 2013 after 19 seasons. And of course, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2018. And his life after playing basketball has been nothing short of remarkable. He became managing director of the USA Basketball's men's national team, overseeing the program that won gold in the 2024 Paris Olympics. He's a co-owner of the Atlanta Hawks. He's a broadcaster. He's an art collector, a businessman, and by every account, one of the most respected people the sport has ever produced. And believe me, my dad and my older cousins will tell you what Grant Hill could have been. And that version, the version we were supposed to get, the player who was being compared to Michael Jordan, that's the version that still hurts. Because unfortunately, we'll never know how good Grant Hill was actually going to be. And that might be the most painful sentence in this entire video. Grant Hill was supposed to be one of the biggest faces in the NBA, but he wasn't the only player in the 1990s that was carrying that kind of weight on his shoulders. Because at that exact time, on the exact same team that Hill would eventually join in Orlando, there was another player who had the entire league convinced that they were watching the next great one. And injuries took him just as early and just as brutally. Man, what do you guys know about Penny Hardaway? Let's take you back to the mid-1990s. Michael Jordan had just won 3 straight championships and then walked away to play baseball. The league was just sitting there, wide open, waiting for the next superstar to claim it. And there were 2 players who looked more ready than anybody else to do exactly that. One of them was Grant Hill. The other one was Anthony Hardaway, better known to the entire basketball world as Penny. Penny grew up in Memphis, raised by his grandmother in circumstances that were far from easy. He played his college ball at Memphis State and was so clearly special that the Golden State Warriors took him 3rd overall in the 1993 draft, only to immediately trade him to the Orlando Magic along with 3 future first-round picks in exchange for the 1st overall pick, who turned out to be Chris Webber. Orlando got Penny, and when they paired him with a young Shaquille O'Neal, what followed was one of the most exciting teams the league had ever seen. Hardaway was a 6'7" point guard at a time when that combination was essentially unheard of. He had the size to oversee defenses, the ball handling to create off the dribble, the passing vision to make everybody around him better, and enough scoring ability to take over a game when he needed to.
One heck of an effort. Here's O'Neal, the trailer from Anthony Hardaway. How do you stop that?
In just his 2nd season, 1994-1995, the Magic went 57-25 and made the NBA Finals. Penny averaged 20 points, 7 assists, and 7 rebounds. He was an all-star. He was an all-NBA first team. He finished 3rd in MVP voting, and he was only 23 years old. The cultural footprint he left during those years went beyond basketball. Nike built an entire alter ego around him. A puppet character named Little Penny, voiced by Chris Rock, that became one of the most recognizable ad campaigns of the decade. Kids wanted to be Penny Hardaway. His shoes sold out. His jersey was everywhere. He was a phenomenon. Oh man, this is depressing. In game 1 of the 1996 playoffs against Detroit, Joe Dumars bumped into the back of Penny's left knee in a routine rebound play.
He hit me perfectly right as I was about to extend the jump. It's like he hit a bone in the back of my knee, and I never felt the same.
But he kept playing. He played through the rest of that playoff series. He played through the entire Eastern Conference Finals. And then he went to Atlanta and represented Team USA at the 1996 Olympics, helping them bring home gold. Nobody outside the organization knew how bad it really was. Penny himself may not have fully known. It wasn't until training camp opened for the 1996-97 season that the pain became impossible to ignore. The team doctors examined him, and what they found made everybody's jaws drop. Penny Hardaway had played an entire playoff run and an entire Olympic tournament on a torn meniscus. He had been out there competing at the highest level on a knee that had no business being on a basketball court. Surgery came immediately, and from that point forward, nothing was ever the same. The 97-98 season was when reality set in for everybody watching. Penny played just 19 games. His left knee was deteriorating in ways that medicine at the time was not fully equipped to fix. He underwent 2 microfracture surgeries on that same knee, procedures that were still relatively new and not well yet understood. Despite all of that, the fans never stopped voting for him. He was named an all-star starter for the 4th straight year in 1998 despite barely playing. That's how much people love Penny. That's how much they wanted the old version of him back. In the 97 playoffs, he averaged 31 points per game, second only to Michael Jordan in the entire postseason. The talent never disappeared completely, but the body kept getting in the way. He bounced to Phoenix, then New York, then to Miami, trying to find one more healthy season, one more chance to show the world who he really was. It never came the way he deserved. He ended up retiring in 2008 after parts of 14 seasons, with career averages of just 15 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds, and just 4 all-star appearances that should have been more than 10. Penny himself had been candid about what the injuries cost him emotionally. He's talked about going from being considered the best player in the league to not being mentioned at all, and how disorienting and painful that transition was for him. When your entire identity is built around being great at something, and then your body takes that away from you, it leaves a mark that statistics cannot capture. But Penny Hardaway found his back to the game in a way that nobody saw coming. In 2018, he was named head coach of the Memphis Tigers, returning to the city and the program that made him. Through 7 seasons there, he compiled a record of 155 wins and 68 losses, won the 2021 NIT, the 2023 AAC tournament title, and in 2025 led Memphis to both the regular season and tournament championships in the AAC with a record of 29-6. He's recruited 2 of the top overall classes in the country, landing generational prospects like James Wiseman and Jalen Duren. He was named the 2025 AAC Coach of the Year. The kid from Memphis who had almost everything went home and built something that belongs entirely to him. And nobody, not even injuries, can take that away from him. Penny Hardaway's story is one of the most painful in NBA history because the injury that derailed everything was hiding in plain sight the entire time. But the next player in this video had a different kind of painful story because his body was being worn down long before he ever set foot on an NBA arena. And by the time the league finally got to see what he was capable of, the clock was already running out. Before Victor Wembanyama, there was Yao Ming. A 7'4" player who moves like a guard, shoots like a wing, and does things on a court that have never been done before at his size. Yao Ming was the player that made the basketball world stop and ask what the ceiling for a big man could actually be. He was not as fluid on the perimeter as Wemby. He didn't have the same guard skills or the shot creation off the dribble. But what Yao had was a combination of size and basketball IQ that made people watching him overseas and in his early NBA years genuinely believe that they were watching the next great giant of this sport. The kind of player whose name would one day sit alongside Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Bill Russell in the conversation about the greatest centers to ever live. That's what was on the table with Yao Ming. He was born in Shanghai in 1980 to 2 former professional basketball players. His mother stood 6'3" and his father at 6'7". So his path was somewhat written before he ever touched the ball. He was playing for the Shanghai Sharks by his mid-teens and developed into one of the most dominant players in Chinese basketball history. He wasn't even old enough to legally drink in the United States. He was selected first overall in the 2002 NBA draft by the Houston Rockets. And immediately there were questions about whether his game would translate. And those questions did not last long. Yao was an immediate force. He averaged 13 points and 8 rebounds as a rookie and was voted to the All-Star game despite being a first-year player, which tells you everything about the impact that he was making. The Rockets ended up pairing him with Tracy McGrady a couple years later, and what followed were some of the most entertaining and promising seasons Houston had seen in years. Yao was an 8-time All-Star. He made 5 All-NBA teams. He was shooting over 52% from the field for his career. He was one of the most unstoppable post scorers the league had seen in a generation, with soft hands, with an unblockable hook shot over either shoulder, and the ability to pass out of a double team at an elite level. He was also a huge cultural bridge between the NBA and China, unlike anything league had ever experienced, opening the sport to over 1 billion people in a way that no marketing campaign could have ever manufactured. But the body that had carried all of that promise was quietly being compromised from the very beginning. The roots of Yao's injury problems trace back to his teenage years in China, where ankle fractures were treated conservatively rather than surgically, leaving damage that compounded over time. By the time he reached the NBA, the foundation was already cracked. A left foot stress fracture ended his 08 season early. Then in the 2009 playoffs against the Los Angeles Lakers, the foot went again. A hairline fracture that seemed manageable at first turned into something far more serious. He missed the entire 2009-2010 season. He came back for just 5 games in the 2010-2011 season before the stress fractures returned and ended his entire season again.
How good do you feel? I mean,
actually not too good. Actually, condition-wise, I'm missing all year from basketball. Or I'm really not in good shape right now.
On July 9th, 2011, Yao Ming announced his retirement in Shanghai. He was 30 years old. Over his final 6 seasons, he missed 250 games. The wear that his 7'6" frame put on his feet and ankles that were already compromised proved too much for medicine to overcome. Shaquille O'Neal, who battled Yao as much as anyone during their careers, said it best. If Yao Ming had stayed healthy, he could have been a top 5 center to ever play the game. That is not a small statement coming from one of the most dominant big men in NBA history. The Houston Rockets retired as number 11 in 2017. He was inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame in 2016, and his life after basketball has been as impactful as his playing career in many ways. He served as president and chairman of the Chinese Basketball Association for years, working to grow the game in his home country. He owns the Shanghai Sharks, the team that started it all for him. He has been a prominent advocate for wildlife conservation, part of a campaign that contributed to a dramatic decline in shark fin consumption in China. He runs the Yao Foundation, which has helped rebuild schools and improve the lives of millions of children following natural disasters. Yao Ming gave the NBA everything his body would allow. And what his body would allow was some of the most breathtaking basketball a big man has ever played. We'll never know the full version of that story, and that's one of the sport's greatest losses. Yao Ming's story is the reminder that sometimes the body just cannot sustain the weight of the greatness living inside it. But the next player in this list had a different kind of tragedy, because his body was fine for long enough to build something truly special, a dynasty in the making. And then one non-contact moment in a playoff game took a sledgehammer to all of it. This is the story of the Sacramento Kings and the man who was supposed to lead them to a championship that this league still owes them to this day. Webber grew up in Detroit, a McDonald's All-American who was the most recruited player in Michigan since Magic Johnson. He chose the University of Michigan, and what he became part of there was not just a basketball team. It was a cultural movement. The Fab Five: Webber, Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard, Jimmy King, and Ray Jackson. 5 freshmen who started together. They wore baggy shorts and black socks when everyone else was in short shorts and white. They brought hip hop into college basketball and made the entire country pay attention. They reached the national championship game as freshmen in '92 and went back again in '93. They were loud. They were confident. They were unapologetically themselves. Every player who came after them, who wore the long shorts, who played with that swagger, who brought their neighborhood with them onto the court, they all owe something to the Fab Five. But the 1993 championship game is one of the most haunting moments in college basketball history. Michigan was down 2 points with 11 seconds left. Webber grabbed a rebound, pushed the ball up the court, got trapped near the sideline.
We'll have to bring it.
Oh, he walked! He walked and the referee missed it.
And called a timeout. The only problem there was that Michigan didn't have any timeouts left. The technical foul gave North Carolina the ball and 2 free throws. The Tar Heels won the championship. Webber had been the best player on the floor that night. 23 points, 11 rebounds, and he's carried that exact moment with him ever since. But the way he's talked about it over the years says everything about who he is. He said he'd show his children that game before any other because it proves that you can be great, lose everything in one instant, and still find a way to keep going.
Because that game, I was the best player on the floor. I led points in scoring and rebounding and others. And I would show him how it doesn't matter. He continued to get better after the worst moment.
The Orlando Magic drafted him first overall in '93 and immediately traded him to Golden State, where he clashed with coach Don Nelson and exercised a contract escape clause after just 1 season. He won Rookie of the Year anyway. He landed in Washington, and while he was there, he showed everybody what he was going to become. And then in 1998, he was traded to the Sacramento Kings. He didn't want to go there. He made that very well known. Sacramento was not Los Angeles or New York. It was not the market he envisioned for himself. But what happened next is one of the great love stories in NBA history. The Kings built something beautiful around Webber. Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic, Mike Bibby, Doug Christie, Bobby Jackson, a team that played with unselfishness and joy and a pace that was unlike anything else in the league at that time. And at the center of all of it was Chris Webber. Sacramento fell in love with him, and eventually he fell in love with Sacramento right back. He was at his absolute peak in 2000-2001, career high 27 points per game, 11 rebounds, 4th in MVP voting. The Kings went 61-21 the following season, the best record in the NBA. And then came the 2002 Western Conference Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. You all know what's coming, right? This series still gets talked about in Sacramento the way a wound gets talked about. The Kings were the better team. Most people watching believe that then, and they believe it now. They took the Lakers to 7 games, and to be honest, they should have won it. Game 6 in LA was one of the most controversial games in NBA history. The Lakers shot 27 free throws in the 4th quarter alone. Webber nearly had a triple-double and it didn't matter. Sacramento lost. They forced a Game 7 at home and they lost that one too, blowing their chances of the free throw line in overtime. Years later, disgraced referee Tim Donahue alleged that the officiating in that series was manipulated. The NBA investigated and found poor officiating but no conclusive evidence of a fix. But the free throw numbers from Game 6 have never been explained to anybody's satisfaction. Sacramento fans have never forgotten. They never will.
Webber has a great block on this ball. I'm not sure where any foul is other than Kobe jumping into defenders who were backing up.
The Kings ended up coming back that very next season even stronger. 59 wins. A roster that looked ready to finally finish what 2002 had started. And then in Game 2 of the 2003 Western Conference semifinals against Dallas, with the Mavericks up big in the 3rd quarter, Webber called over to Bibby and told him to throw a lob. He said that if he didn't dunk it, he would at least grab it. So Mike Bibby threw it. Webber went to receive it, planted on his left leg, and his knee gave out underneath him. He crumpled to the floor and didn't get back up. It was a lateral meniscus tear, and it required surgery. The Kings lost that series without him, and they never got back to where they were. He returned the following season, but he was never the same player. The explosiveness that made him so impossible to guard was gone. The Kings slowly came apart. Webber was eventually traded to Philadelphia in 2005, then Detroit, then back to Golden State where it all began. He ended up retiring in 2008 when his knees gave out one final time, saying he went all the way until the wheels fell off and he had no regrets. Webber had 5 All-Star selections, 5 All-NBA teams, a career average of 20 points and nearly 10 rebounds. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2021, presented by his idol, Charles Barkley. In his induction speech, he looked out to the crowd and said that God gave him Sacramento and that his faith would forever be strong because of it. The city that he didn't want to go to became the place that defined him. After basketball, Webber spent 13 years as an analyst on TNT, returned to broadcasting in 2025 for college basketball coverage, published an autobiography in 2024, and has become one of the most prominent voices in the NBA scene. He is also going to be a minority owner of Detroit's new WNBA expansion franchise, coming home to the city that made him in yet another way. If you ask me, I think Chris Webber deserved a championship. The Sacramento Kings might have deserved a championship. And the fact that they never got one, for reasons that had nothing to do with talent, is one of the greatest injustices in the history of this sport.
I'm thankful that God allowed me to be in Sacramento and let me be a King.
And I feel like I gotta add this. After that injury, he didn't get any more All-Star appearances. So that's exactly what this video is about. It's what the injuries took away from all of these great players. Our next player on this list has a different kind of story, because what happened to him was not gradual. It was not a slow fade. It happened in one single moment, on one single play. And it was so devastating that the entire basketball world wasn't worrying about whether he would play again. They were worried about whether he would even be able to walk. We all know that there's injuries in sports that make you wince. There are injuries that make you look away. And then there's what happened to Shawn Livingston on February 26, 2007. That one is in a category by itself. Livingston came into the league with as much promise as any guard of his generation. He was drafted 4th overall by the Los Angeles Clippers straight out of high school in 2004. He was 6'7" with the handles and vision of a point guard. And in his first few seasons, he was starting to show exactly why the Clippers had taken him that high. He was young, he was developing, and the basketball world was waiting for him to take that next step. Then came that night in Charlotte. Livingston drove to the basket, went up for a layup, and landed on the side of his left knee. What happened next was one of the most gruesome injuries the sport has ever seen. In fact, I can't even show it without blurring it. He dislocated his kneecap. He tore his ACL. He tore his PCL. He tore his lateral meniscus. He sprained his MCL. And he even dislocated his tibiofibular joint. Essentially, every major structure in his left knee was destroyed in a single play. A team doctor had to come onto the court and physically manipulate the knee back into place to relieve the pain. ESPN News put a viewer warning on the screen before airing the footage. There was a genuine fear in the immediate aftermath that Shawn Livingston might need an amputation, that he might never walk normally again.
Basically compared it to a car crash. Of course, they was talking about the whole, amputation and all that. They threw that around early because of the, blood flow.
The Clippers team physician called it probably the most serious injury you could have to a knee, and he was not exaggerating. Livingston spent the next 16 months doing nothing but rehabbing, learning how to walk again, learning to trust a knee that had been completely rebuilt from the inside out.
So what's the timeline? Who can I bounce it off of? What's the blueprint? Doctors don't have nothing.
When he was finally cleared to play in June of 2008, the Clippers didn't re-sign him. And what followed was one of the most difficult stretches any professional athlete has ever had to endure. He signed with Miami, then Memphis, who ended up waiving him. He went to the D-League to keep playing, to keep proving that he still belonged. He signed with Oklahoma City, who cut him 3 days before Christmas. He bounced to Washington, Charlotte, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Brooklyn. He was waived 4 separate times. 4 times the franchise looked at what was left of Shawn Livingston and decided it was not enough. But here's what makes his story unlike anyone in this video. Livingston rebuilt his game completely from scratch. The explosive attacking guard who went down in Charlotte was gone. The player who emerged from all of those years of fighting was something different. He became a patient, methodical, mid-range assassin. A player who used his 6'7" frame to get a shot off over any guard in the league with footwork and a touch that nobody had taught him because nobody else played quite like him. He couldn't do what he used to do, so he became something new entirely. In 2014, the Golden State Warriors signed him, and over the next 5 seasons, Shawn Livingston won 3 NBA championships. He played in 5 straight NBA finals. The player who was told 4 separate times he was not good enough became one of the most trusted vets on one of the greatest dynasties the sport has ever seen.
He just leave him open. Livingston tight-roping the sideline, lob to Harrison.
He played 15 NBA seasons and 959 games. Think about that number for just one moment. On the night his knee was destroyed in Charlotte, yes, that's right, destroyed, the question was whether he would ever walk normally again. After that, he went on to play 959 professional basketball games. The Clippers announcer at the time said it best: there was just no way Shawn Livingston should have been playing basketball after that injury. There's no way. After his playing career ended, Livingston joined the Warriors front office in 2020 as Director of Player Affairs and Engagement, the highest ranking black executive in the organization since 2008. He stepped away in 2023 to spend more time with his family, but everything about where he landed speaks to the kind of person he is. He said he wants people to use his story to stand up. After every time he was waived, and every setback, and every moment where it could have been completely reasonable to just walk away, Shawn Livingston persevered. and the basketball world is better because of it. Livingston's story is the one in this video that gives you hope, but the next player we're talking about had a journey that was filled with brilliance and heartbreak in equal measure, stretched across decades, and he didn't find his peace until the very end. Walton was one of the most dominant college basketball players anyone had ever seen. He led UCLA to 2 national championships and an 88-game winning streak that has never been matched. In the 1973 title game, he made 21 out of his 22 shots and scored 44 points. He was, by every measure, the most gifted big man the college game had ever produced. The Portland Trail Blazers took him first overall in 1974. In 1977, Walton led Portland to the only championship in franchise history and was also named Finals MVP. The following season, he won the league MVP award. He was a 7-foot center who could pass, defend, read the game, and anchor a team in a way that almost no big man in history could match. And then his feet gave out. He had chronic stress fractures, bones that could not hold up under the demands of an NBA season. He missed almost all of the 78-79 season. He missed the entire 79-80 season. He missed the entire 80-81 season. He eventually had surgery to fuse both ankles, a procedure that was supposed to give him his career back. Instead, the injuries kept on coming. Walton played in fewer than half the games his teams played. He was the most talented player on the floor whenever he was healthy, and healthy was something he almost never got to be. There was one last beautiful chapter though. In 1985-86, at 33 years old, Walton came off the bench for the Boston Celtics alongside his idol Larry Bird and won his 2nd ever championship, taking home 6th Man of the Year in what he called the greatest season of his life. He said that playing basketball with Larry Bird was like singing with Jerry Garcia. For one season, everything worked, and then it was over. A lot of you guys don't know about Big Bill Walton. If you guys want to hear more about the 80s, be sure to go check out my 80s recap. He ended up retiring with just 468 career games, a number that tells the entire story of what could have been. But Bill Walton refused to disappear. He reinvented himself as a broadcaster, becoming one of the most beloved and entertainingly unique voices the sport has ever seen. And then long after his NBA career, in 2008, his back ended up giving out. A spinal condition left him in pain so severe that he had spoken openly about how dark those years were, how close he came to losing himself entirely before a major spinal surgery finally gave him some relief. He wrote about this in his memoir, and the honesty with which he described that period of his life is something that deserves to be remembered alongside everything he accomplished on the court. Bill Walton sadly passed on May 27, 2024, at the age of 71. The world mourned him the way you mourn someone who gave the game everything and never once asked for sympathy in return. He was one of a kind in every sense of the phrase. What he could have been with a healthy back across a full career is something the sport never got to find out, and that's a loss that belongs to all of us. Bill Walton's story is a reminder that sometimes the cruelest thing a body can do is give you just enough to show the world what you are, and then take it away before the world gets to see the rest. The final player in this video knows exactly what that feels like, except his story has 2 acts, and somehow injuries found a way to end both of them. In 2009, the Los Angeles Clippers had the #1 overall pick in the NBA draft, and they used it on a 6'10" power forward out of Oklahoma who looked like he had been sent from the future specifically to make highlight reels.
Himself on the dunk. Did he hit his head? He came back and hit.
Blake Griffin was explosive in a way that the league had genuinely never seen from a player his size. The combination of athleticism, strength, and skill he brought to the table made him must-watch TV from the moment his name was called. Except he never got to play his rookie year. In the final preseason game before the 2009-2010 season, Griffin fractured his left kneecap and underwent surgery. He missed the entire year before he even got to play a single regular season game. When Griffin finally stepped onto the floor in 2010-2011, he made up for lost time immediately. He won Rookie of the Year unanimously, the first unanimous winner since David Robinson. He made the All-Star team as a rookie. And then in February of 2011, he ended up winning the slam dunk contest by leaping over the hood of a Kia Optima. And just a couple years later, Lob City was born. The Clippers paired Griffin with Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan. And what followed were some of the most entertaining seasons any team in the league was putting together. Griffin was the centerpiece of all of it. In 2014, he finished 3rd in MVP voting behind Kevin Durant and LeBron James, averaging 24 points and 9 rebounds. But unfortunately for Blake, the injuries were already starting to chip away. A torn meniscus in his left knee in 2012 costed him the London Olympics. A partially torn quad tendon on Christmas Day 2015 limited him to just 35 games that season. A broken hand suffered in an incident with a team staffer costed him time and a suspension. Another knee surgery in December of 2016. Every year there was something. The first step was not quite as sharp. The vertical leap was not quite as high. The thing that made Blake Griffin was quietly leaving him. Then in January of 2018, he was traded to the Detroit Pistons. And what happened next is one of the most remarkable individual transformations the NBA has ever seen. Griffin couldn't be the player he used to be, so he decided to become something else entirely. He rebuilt his game from the ground up, developing a reliable 3-point shot, an advanced post game, an improved handle, and a playmaking ability that nobody had ever fully asked from him before. The results were stunning, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Blake, I love you. In 2018-2019, at 29 years old, Blake Griffin had the best statistical season of his entire career. 24.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists per game. He scored 50 points in a single game against Philly. He dragged a limited Detroit roster into the playoffs on sheer will and skill alone. But as you all know, the Nice took that version of him too.
The Detroit mentality. I mean, there's a guy sitting to my right, Ben Wallace. Ben can appreciate what he has seen in Blake these last 2 ball games.
He played through a torn meniscus in the 2019 playoffs, sitting out the first 2 games and gutting through the final 2 on a knee that had no business being on a court. The crowd in Detroit, including myself, gave him a standing ovation as he walked off. Surgery came after the season, then a second surgery on the same knee in January of 2020. He played just 18 games that year. The rebuilt version of Blake Griffin, the one he had spent years constructing from the wreckage of the first version, was already gone. He spent time with the Brooklyn Nets, then finished his career with the Boston Celtics in 2022-2023, reaching the Eastern Conference Finals on a limited role before stepping away from the game entirely. He announced his retirement in April of 2024 after just 13 seasons. In his retirement letter, he wrote that he was thankful not just for the wins, not just for the dunks, and not just the awards, but also for the losses, the injuries, the way too many surgeries, and the lessons. Griffin wasted no time building something new. He joined Amazon Prime Video as an NBA studio analyst, working alongside Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, and Udonis Haslem on one of the most anticipated new broadcasting teams the league had seen in years. He co-founded a Hollywood production company called Mortal Media with former NFL center Ryan Khalil. He's thriving in a way that makes you so happy for him, which is not always the easiest thing to feel when someone's playing career ends the way his did. Blake Griffin came into the league as one of the most electrifying athletes anyone had ever seen. Injury stripped away that version of him. He built a second version from scratch, and injury stripped that one away too. Most people would have let that be the end of their story. Blake Griffin decided it was just the beginning of the next chapter. Now that was 10 players, 10 careers that were supposed to go differently, 10 stories that remind you just how fragile greatness can be. We watched Derrick Rose go from the youngest MVP in NBA history to a shell version of himself. We watched Yao Ming open the world to this sport and leave at 30 years old because his body simply had nothing left to give. And we watched Blake Griffin get rebuilt from scratch twice, only for injuries to find him both times. These men gave us moments we'll never forget, and they gave us questions that we'll never stop asking. What if the knee holds? What if the ankle heals clean? What if we got the full version of every single one of these players? But what we do know is that every single one of these men competed with everything they had for as long as their bodies would allow. And in some cases, even longer than that. That deserves more than just a what if. That deserves more than just our sympathy. It deserves our respect. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, hype this video up, and please, 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 please subscribe. We're on our goal to 100,000 subs and we can't do it without you. Oh, and subscribe to our podcast channel, please. If you guys did enjoy, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below what the saddest story for you was. And while you're here, you may as well check out one of the videos that we have on the screen, right? I'm sure you'll love them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope I didn't make y'all cry too much. I'll see you in the next one.